All right. Start sharing. All right. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us again tonight. Tonight, Julie and I are going to be talking about Ngconf 2021 and Angular version 12. Every year after Ngconf, Julie and I like to do a wrap up to give everyone information from the conference that we learned and provide links to the talks once they're available. We also like to do talks that focus on all the new features of every major Angular version release. This month, both happen to coincide on the same meetup. So there's gonna be a lot of information today that we're gonna give you. We're gonna try to keep it under an hour so it's not too much information, but let's get started without any other delay. So first, what is Ngconf? So it is generally the largest Angular conference. It's also the original Angular conference. Like for me, when I think of Angular and conferences, I first think of Ngconf. This year it was held over 2 days and it was also entirely online due to COVID-19. They just want to make sure that it was safe for everyone. All of the talks that we're going to be talking about today will have the links to their videos posted on YouTube soon. They normally do it about a month after the conference is when they start rolling out the videos, which is about where we're at now. I don't think the links are available for these talks yet, but again, they will be on YouTube soon. The organizers are always really great about adding that information in.
The keynotes are available now.
Yes, they are. Thank you. So definitely check those out. So they did a couple things differently this year. First, they had a single day of free workshops the week before the conference. They still had their regular paid workshops the week of the conference. So that's really nice if you want to do a deep dive on some sort of topic or want to do like a training with your company, you can attend the paid workshops. And then the regular part of the conference that you get with your ticket is the 2 days of the technical talks. And then because we were virtual, they also had lightning talks during the lunch hours, which is really cool because it gave people a chance that don't regularly get to talk at Ngconf, a chance to talk to still a pretty big group of people and get some exposure and start their speaking career. And they also had virtual hallway track and sponsor booths to try to replicate some of that in-person feel. Julie, did I miss anything about?
Nope, that sounds good.
Conferences in general? All right, cool. So there were a lot of topics that were covered at Ngconf. Again, it's a conference over 2 days, like 2 8-hour days. So we're not going to be able to cover everything in detail that they covered at the conference in this talk today, but we're going to do our best to give you the highlights and the spark notes. So let's start the review. But I do want to remind everyone, this is, again, just kind of like the Spark Notes, the high level information. We very much encourage everyone to go watch the talks by the original speakers because this is not a substitute for those talks. All the speakers put in so much work for their talks. The talks are so amazing. It's definitely worth watching on YouTube to really get all of the information. So let's start with our first topic, which is microfrontends. So this came from a talk called Federated Angular, Why and How by Manfred Steyer. He always gives talks on like really complex topics, and I always get to learn a lot from his talks. I'm always excited. So what are microfrontends if you're not familiar? So basically what microfrontends are a way to take one really large application and break it down into a lot of small applications and stitch them all together. So why would you want to use a microfrontend? So the first thing is if you have a really large product. If you have a really small product, honestly, microfrontends are probably not going to be very useful for you. But if you have a big product, you have a lot of teams that you want to break up and you want those teams to be able to work on different business domains independently, microfrontends are definitely a solution that you should look into. Another benefit is that you can swap out technology on the different teams. So maybe you're a bigger company, you've acquired other smaller companies. You started with Angular, maybe this other company is using Vue, you have another company using React. With microfrontends, you can keep all those code bases the same and pull everything into one single application. Historically, there have been a couple downsides to microfrontends. The first is that to stitch all of those smaller applications into one big application, you have to build this meta framework, which takes a bit of effort to do. It's also a little bit difficult to share, or really difficult to share runtime code. So imagine if you want to share the same Angular components across different front ends, or you want to share the same Angular code, so you're not reloading Angular multiple times. It's been hard to do that historically. And it's also really easy to lose that common look and feel, because even though you're running a bunch of small applications, you want your application to look like one single application, right? Your user shouldn't know if you have a bunch of micro front ends or if it's just one single application. But if you have, part of it is React, part of it's Vue, part of it's Angular, it can be easier to lose that common look and feel. Some of these downsides still exist today, but some of them are a little bit easier now. So with Webpack 5, there's been the introduction of module federations, which makes implementing this micro front-end architecture a lot easier. So first, there's no longer the need to create that meta framework that we mentioned before was difficult and took some effort to do. And now it's also a lot easier to share code just with some simple configuration. And this configuration is really simple, similar to configuring lazy loaded bundles in Angular, which a lot of us are already familiar with today. So those were the two of the largest trade-offs in implementing micro front ends, that meta framework and not being able to share code. Those are both possible now. Those are both easier now with Webpack 5 and module federation. So how do you do this? So you're interested, you want to try using micro front ends. Manfred created this really awesome npm package, which is you can download with at Angular Architects /module federation. And it provides a seamless Webpack module federation that uses the Angular CLI. So it's easy to use, especially for Angular developers. It will auto-generate the configuration that you need to wire everything together. So you'll probably need to make a couple tweaks, but it's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And then you just end-use serve like your regular application. Manfred, of course, had a lot more details in his talk. So if this is something that interests you, definitely check out his talk once it's posted to YouTube. He also has on his website, which I think is angulararchitects.io. He has more information about this. He's had a couple other talks about micro front ends. So there's a lot of information out there from him already if this is a topic that interests you. So now I'm going to throw it over to Julie. And she's going to give you some highlights from a couple other talks.
So I18N, we go, this was a lightning talk done by Inbal Sinai. Sorry if I butchered her name. But she talked about this third-party application for called Transloco for translation. It's something that they use on their team on Salesforce, and they found it very useful for everything they want to do for localization and changing languages. So it comes with its own schematics, which makes it really easy to install and incorporate into your code. It uses structural directives to enable developers to easily maintain clean and dry templates. The language files are all lazy loaded, so if you only load the language files that the browser actually can use, which is nice. You can use multiple language fallbacks. It supports server-side rendering, and it has a good number of plugins that you can use with it. And they really swear by it. I've included the link there. And if you're doing a lot of localization in I18N and translations, this might be something that works for your company. So it's something worthwhile to check out. And SwitchMap. So for SwitchMap, this was a talk called SwitchMap Wizard by Laura Newsom. And at the beginning of her talk, they did a song. Oh my gosh, what was the song? I can't remember what it was, but they did kind of a play off of it, singing about switch maps. It's pretty funny. If you want to see something funny, make sure you watch that. But then when she got into the guts of her talk, she started out with an example, which I show here, that is a nested subscription, which is an anti-pattern. And she said what she wanted to talk about was that instead of doing something like nested subscriptions, which is a no-no, use either SwitchMap or MergeMap or ConCatMap or ExhaustMap. And they allow you to return observable or any observable like structures. So you can return observables, you can return arrays, iterables, but you have control over what you return. And she also talked about, if you go to the next screen, she talked about a way to decide which one you want to use. And she had a lot of fancy graphics that talked about if you care about whether you retain all of your values from the source and the inner observables. If you care about that, then you need to use either ConCatMap or MergeMap. And then if you care about it and the order matters, and so you want everything returned in order, then you need to use ConCatMap. If the order doesn't matter, you can use MergeMap. And then for, let's see. And then if you don't care if everything is returned, like if you are on a dog page and there's observables going in the background, you're describing stuff in the background, you decide to go to the cat page, then once you've gone to the cat page, you don't care about the dog page anymore. And so you can stop all of that and then just go to the cat page, and you can use SwitchMap and ExhaustMap for those. So she goes in depth about that, and it was a really interesting talk. And so if you want to learn more about the SwitchMap, ExhaustMap, MergeMap, and ConCatMap, and listen to a funny song and see cool graphics, then make sure and check out Laura Newsom's talk on SwitchMaps.
It was also great because those are 4 operators that are not the easiest to use right away. And she did such a great job of breaking it down and really teaching you how to use them and how to use them properly.
Yes, she did. It was really good. I enjoyed that one a lot.
She had a great talk at the Enterprise conference too. I'm excited to see future talks from her.
Yeah, I like her. And what's next? Component harness. Okay, this was another lightning talk from someone who's Annie Wing is actually on the team of Angular Material and working on the component harness, which is a part of the CDK for Angular Material. What is a component harness? It's an API for interacting with components like a user would that works with unit and EDE tests. So like a user would push buttons and do things in a component harness can emulate that. And why should we use them? It makes your code easier to read and it removes the brittleness. So instead of clicking on instead of you're selecting a specific CSS, by the CSS, you are using a component harness instead of calling out a specific class of CSS. And so it helps to remove the brittleness by doing that. And Angular Material provides component harnesses for all of their components that they provide. And they also teach you how to write your own component harnesses for your own custom components. So that's something that us that are at Teradata have been thinking about doing, and we've started dabbling in it, but we haven't really gotten into it yet. But I think it's a great idea to help with testing. So looking forward to that. Template, did you move stuff around?
I don't think so.
I was going to say, all of a sudden, all my stuff's in this. Okay, template-driven forms. So this was a really cool talk by Ward Bell. And if you've been around Angular a while and gone to any conference, you probably know who Ward Bell is. He's always kind of outrageously dressed, and he's been writing Angular for a long time, since probably the beginning, I think. But anyway, he talked about preferring template-driven forms to reactive forms. And he talked about, which I actually found really interesting, because again, at Teradata, we tend to do more, we've tend to do more template-driven forms, and we have very, very few reactive forms, and we've always done template-driven forms, but I've always heard about all the negatives about why you shouldn't do template-driven forms, like no NGRX, they mutate the state, they're bad for complex scenarios, you can't use them for value change detection, dynamic fields, cross-field dependencies, all of that stuff. But what Ward specifies is this fun fact that both template-driven and reactive forms share the same forms API in the back. So they're actually using the same backbone for everything they do. But with reactive forms, you're writing that forms control tree by hand. So you're doing all of the work for Angular, whereas in template-driven forms, Angular's done all that work for you, so they're doing the work for you. Now, I don't know about you, but the less work I have to do, the happier I am. And so he actually, this Stack Blitz is a template-driven form that does everything that people claim template-driven forms can't do. And he goes into the in-depth about it. And I thought it was just a really great talk. And so definitely be sure and check that out, and check out the Stack Blitz. It's a lot of fun to play with.
And he also mentioned like all these things, like you can't use it with NGRX or mutate state or all those things. Like he's used template-driven forms in like very complex situations, like huge companies. So this isn't like it's just a Stack Blitz and, oh, that's not real life. Like, no, he's used it in real life.
Didn't he do it for like TurboTax?
I don't remember if he said the company.
Okay.
He might have, it might have been TurboTax. Yeah.
Yeah. He mentioned TurboTax, and I don't know if that was one of his customers, but
it sounds familiar.
Yeah. And then, okay.
Did you have something else for forms?
Back to you.
Okay. All right. Awesome. We're gonna be kind of swapping back and forth. All right. So PWAs. Let me just say from the get-go, you need to go watch this talk. Whether you're interested in PWAs or not, this was one of the most entertaining talks at Ng-conf this year to me. And nothing I say right now is going to give it really justice, but I'm going to do my best. But this talk was called Crafting Bespoke PWA Experiences with Angular by Mark Thompson. So I'm going to give you the highlights, but then once this talk is available online, definitely go watch it. It's very worth it. So what are PWAs? PWAs are progressive web applications. And Mark was talking about how they are a much better option to having an application that's installable rather than having to like download an application. So in other words, with PWAs, you can have apps that users can like install on their phone from the web without having to go to like the Google Play Store or the Apple Store and downloading a specific application that you write with like Android or iOS. You can do it all with your Angular application. And there are a couple of benefits of PWAs. One is that with a PWA, your website or your web application, I should say, can work offline. And it uses service workers under the hood to make all this happen. So instead of getting that, sad gray page with the dinosaur that says you have no connection, your application will still load and work offline using a bunch of cached resources and using service workers. You can also get, whether you're offline or online, faster load times using that caching, and then also using predictive prefetching. So there's a lot more information and benefits of PWAs and how you can configure it all. But I know for me, PWAs have always sounded really good, but they've sounded a little intimidating to set up. Like, how do you do that? How do you get service workers going? All of that. Luckily, Angular provides out of the box a PWA schematic that you can install. It's at Angular/PWA. That's going to set up a lot of this for you, so that you can get all of the benefits of service workers and configuration out of the box. Again, you probably have to configure it and tweak it a little bit to make sure that's caching the pages that you want to cache, and that it's doing the prefetching strategies that you want. But for the most part, it's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It's another example of how schematics in the Angular CLI make Angular a powerful framework to use. But again, go a lot more details in this talk. Definitely go check it out. It was very entertaining. And generally he's really great and does really good talks in general. So he's one of the speakers that I always look forward to hearing from. All right, RxJS. So let's talk about some updates that are coming with RxJS 7. So all this information came from Ben Lesh, which is in the keynote from day 2, which, as Julie mentioned earlier, is online on YouTube now, so you can actually go watch this today. So I'm gonna try to give you the highlights from his talk, but it's definitely worth going and watching it yourself if any of this sounds like something you're interested in or sounds like something you want more information about. So first, when the talk was given, RxJS 7 was not out yet. I think they were just about to do the first release candidate, but now I went and checked last night. RxJS 7 has been released and is out there and ready for everyone, which is really exciting. They've been talking about RxJS 7, it feels like, for a really long time, and about all the benefits that are coming, and now it's here. So what's going on with RxJS 7? What are the updates you need to know about? First, it's much smaller. Ben Lesh said that if you included everything in RxJS, which really no one does, most people are only using a couple operators, or I mean, even a good amount, but not all the operators. But if you included everything, it's 53% smaller than RxJS 6, or the last version of RxJS 6. So that is a huge improvement. This was not done with like a major rewrite of the application. They really just did, small refactors and small cleanup here and there. And over time, they, with all the improvements they made, and using like a newer version of TypeScript, they were able to just get to a much smaller version, which is really great for everyone. One other thing they've done is that there is much better type safety. So previously they were using an older version of TypeScript, which just didn't give them all of the benefits of the latest versions of TypeScript. And there were just some issues with typing. Like if you wanted to do combine latest and you had more than, I think, like 8 subscriptions that you were combining, you'd like have issues and you couldn't do more than that, or you lose the types for them. So that's not a problem anymore. So just generally across the board, better type safety with RxJS 7. They've also deprecated toPromise. This is something they've been talking about for a while. I think most people probably knew this was coming. The time has finally arrived. toPromise is deprecated. So now instead you should use first value from or last value from. So if toPromise is something that you use a lot in your code base, definitely make sure that you check this out and choose the right operator for what you need. There's definitely some good docs out there. And this gives you better control over your promise values, and you can really make sure that you're getting the value that you want and that you expect. The toPromise operator hasn't been removed yet. It's just deprecated. So you can upgrade to RxJS 7 and this won't break it. However, there is some breaking behavior. So there were a lot of bugs that were fixed with RxJS 7. A lot of them were around consistency in the API. And a lot of these were things like things being outputted in the wrong order, or just the API not working how you would think, or the API working outputting values in one order in one area, but then very similar code would do something completely different. So they've gone through and really cleaned up all of that. One example that he talked about was the finalize operator was causing issues in a couple different situations. So for example, in concat, the finalize operator would output, I think like earlier than you would expect it to. And then if you like had multiple finalize operators, like you had like finalize 1 and finalize 2, finalize 2 would actually output an event before finalize 1. They would do it in the reverse order. So again, these are just things that, looking at the code, it's not what you would expect. So they've gone through and cleaned it all up. But again, this could possibly break your code if you were depending on this breaking behavior. So definitely worth, as you do the upgrade to RxJS 7, going through and looking at these breaking changes to make sure that it's not going to affect your code. I think for the most part, it's not going to affect hopefully a large amount of people's code. And maybe just a couple edge cases here and there if it affects anything at all. But definitely look out because no one likes having breaking changes during an upgrade. One of the other big changes they made is they've consolidated all of the multicast operators into one share operator. So right now there's something like 7, 9 different like multicast operators that all kind of do very similar things in a slightly different way. And again, with that from that consistency standpoint, they're not always doing things in the way that developers expect. So Ben Lesh actually mentioned that a lot of the bugs that they get are from people using the multicast operators in having the output not be what they expect. So like there's one situation where like if you use, I think it's share replay twice, and when you unsubscribe, people expect it to unsubscribe from all of the shared subscriptions, but only unsubscribes from one. So people think that they're leaking subscriptions, and other weird quirks like that. So they've cleaned up all that code. There's now just the one share operator that they suggest everyone use. Like to promise, all the old operators are only deprecated. They haven't been removed, so you can keep using them. But they definitely suggest that people start looking at this the new share operator to once you upgrade to RxJS 7, because it's just going to be a better experience. There's also a lot of really exciting new features. I don't have them all listed here, but I listed some of the ones. So one thing is animation frames. So that's an operator that will output an observer an event on every animation frame, and I think give you like the timestamp of when the frame was emitted. So that could be really cool if you're doing like, you know, animations, or depending on how you're rendering things. There's a new switch scan operator. Combine latest now takes it takes an object if you want. There's a new way to do it. There's a throw error factory function. A lot of really cool features. I'm just going to kind of skim over them right now, just for the sake of time. But definitely look at the keynote from day 2 if you're interested in any of this, which I think a lot of people are going to be, because we all use RxJS. He also gave a talk at RxJS Live on April 30th. So I haven't been able to find that online yet, but he said he would go into everything in a lot more detail at the RxJS Live talk. So once that's online, it's probably also worth watching if you're really into the specific changes that are coming to RxJS. Did I miss anything with that, Julie?
Nope.
All right.
I don't think so.
All right. Then Julie, I'll give it back to you for forms.
Forms. Yeah, this was the other one on forms. And this one was done by Jennifer Wadella. And she did a choose your own adventure type game with forms. And she walked through an adventure game using both reactive forms and template driven forms to build up a dynamic form so that you could reach the end of the game. And I thought that was really interesting, because for her, the moral of the story is there are so many different ways to solve problems in Angular, and whatever works best for you or your team is the best way to do it. And it's not about reactive forms or template driven forms. It's whatever works for you. Neither one is the right answer or the be all end all. It's whatever works for you. And so her slides are there that I've included, and it was a fun talk to watch. And TypeScript. So Alan, who we've had as a speaker at one of our live Angular meetups, which seems like a lifetime ago, did a talk on 5 TypeScript tips for Angular JS. And so his first tool was to use something called this JSON2TS, which takes in a JavaScript, a JSON object, and converts it to a TypeScript interface, which I didn't know about, but I think this would be really useful. It also can include optional properties and nested objects. But if you need to convert a JSON object to TypeScript, I think this will be a great thing to use. So that was his first tip. And his second tip was using partial for interfaces. So if you have information coming from 2 different backends and you need to build your object or your interface, so maybe you you've got an option, which is just an ID and a text, and then you've got a question that has its own ID and text that it gets from the question backend, and then options that it gets from the options backend. You could make the option a optional property, but instead of doing that, you can do a partial question. So that way the compiler won't scream about the fact that you haven't provided the options. And then you can provide it. So this will give you a way to build it up piece by piece instead of having to include everything into the interface at one point. So that was something I didn't know either. So I thought that was pretty useful. And then the third one is union types instead of enums. And so I think we usually do this, but if you have an enum engine status, this turns into a whole bunch of JavaScript that's unnecessary. Whereas you could just use a union type like this. And since these are just strings, then it just converts back to strings. So you're not creating a lot of extra JavaScript. So, and then the fourth one was our famous nullish coalescing operator, which I think most people know about, but if you don't, if you are used to testing, if the response isn't null and it isn't undefined, then return the response, else return some default response. That's a bunch of balooey, a bunch of extra stuff. Instead, you can just test the response using this nullish coalescing operator, the double question marks. And if it's not null or undefined or any type of zero, empty string, whatever, and then you can return the default. So that's a good one that I think most people know. And then the last one was path mapping to simplify verbose out imports. Instead of having an import that has all of this, you'd rather have something that looks like the shared service instead of all these paths, trying to locate where your shared service is. The way you can get by that is to do this path mapping in your tsconfig base.json, and you can include all of the paths here so that when you go back to import something, you don't have all of the excess directory structure in there. So that was, did I mean double ampersand? Or
let's talk about the previous slide there, Julie.
The nullish coalescing operator?
Yeah, the previous slide. Sorry about that.
No problem. But no, I believe the nullish coalescing operator is the question mark, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Okay.
I was probably looking at the wrong part of the slide.
That's fine. It's
okay.
No problem. I was just like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. Okay, and that was it for the TypeScript tips.
Awesome.
And what's next? Tailwind. I'm going to pass
Tailwind.
it back to Michi.
Sounds good. All right, Tailwind is something that I always hear a lot about. I was very excited they had a talk on it at Ng-conf, so I could learn a little bit more. So this talk was called Tailwind, The Future of CSS is Here by Amadou Sal. So first Amadou talked about some of the downsides of using Bootstrap. So first, it's rigid. It's hard to customize. It has its own set of rules. It has like a set number of components that it comes with. And then those components look like everyone else's components, right? The same thing can also be said of Angular materials component library. You can do things to tweak the look and feel so it looks more similar to your application or maybe what your designer wants, but it's a lot harder to do that with things like Bootstrap and Material. So using something like Tailwind could be something that you should look into. So what Tailwind is it's basically this really large set of CSS utilities that's provided to you instead of providing you pre-made components. The cool thing about the utilities is it gives you things like adding padding and margin and just all those common things that you're doing in your CSS. You can just add it right in the HTML. So instead of having to go back and forth between your HTML and your CSS file, everything is very declarative in your HTML file. And there's also responsive variants baked in. So you can say like, all right, at an extra large size, add this, at a large size, do this. Again, all right in your HTML. You don't have to worry about the media queries or writing the CSS. So all of this allows you to, instead of using pre-built components in something like Bootstrap or Angular Material, you can create your own components really quickly, and you can use these standard utilities to, or this standard CSS utilities to build it out real fast and to make tweaks fast and prototype. So definitely some really interesting thoughts here. So with anything, there are pros and cons to using something like Tailwind. So pros, you stay in your HTML, right? I said that before. You avoid having to come up with CSS class names because naming is hard and we're all really bad at it. You can rapidly prototype and adjust with the utilities. And then you can also refactor with confidence. You don't have to worry about like, did you clean up all the styles properly? Did you clean up the right ones? Did you accidentally delete something extra? Everything's in the HTML. If you're not using that HTML element, you can just get rid of it. No extra CSS to clean up. What are some cons? You do need to be pretty good with CSS to understand how everything is going to work and how the styles are going to be applied. Having all of those utilities in your HTML does mean that the HTML gets to be a little bit verbose. And then, you do have to build all of your components from scratch. So that does take some extra time to build those components from scratch. But, if it's something that your company wants everything to have a very specific look and feel, they want your own internal component library, using something like Tailwind can help you get up to speed a bit quicker. And then again, have everyone just using the same utilities. So it's definitely worth looking into. Again, like anything, there's pros and cons. I know some people that aren't a big fan of CSS utilities, and so something like Tailwind is not what they want to use, and they want to have more semantic CSS. But it's a popular tool, and I think it's popular for a reason. So, and it provides a lot of things right out of the box for you. So definitely worth looking into, especially if you're building your own component library, because I think there's a good chance that some of these utilities you'll probably just end up recreating yourself. So why not include it in a pre-made package? And the nice thing is that Angular added Tailwind support in Angular, I think 11.2. So you can really easily add Tailwind to your Angular project. John Papa was opinionated on this one. There are a lot of people that have opinions on Tailwind. Not everyone is pro Tailwind, but it's I think it's one of those things that it's worth looking into and forming your own opinion to see if Tailwind works for you. Kind of like template forms versus reactive forms. There's not one right answer for everyone. Everything's like you should choose what's best for you and your team. Is it free? I do believe it is free. Is there anyone that can? I'm pretty sure it's free.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right, cool. Why is this not working? Okay, there we go. All right, HTTP interceptors. Julie, I'll give it back to you.
Okay. This talk was it was a talk by John Papa, which we were just talking about. I just provided his resources here because there was too much information on this to go through. So I would watch the video when it becomes available, and you can check out the links that he provided. Whoops. Headless CMS.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening.
Headless CMS. Okay, this was a talk by Eric Slack. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. Good job. Eric Sack, who we've had speak at Angular before, and in fact, I think he actually did this talk, and this was a shortened lightning talk version of his talk about building apps and not content. And I think headless CMSs are great he provided reasons why they're great for clients, which is they can make their own changes immediately without having to wait for the developer to make changes. They can easily add new images, videos, and downloads, add their own content, again, without having to wait and pay for some developer to do it. So it saves time, well, maybe not time, maybe more money, because they don't have to pay a developer to do it. They have to do it themselves. But that's good for clients. And then for app developers, they aren't making the changes themselves anymore. So there's less urgent changes. The collaboration is increased between the client and the app developer, and the developer themselves gets time back because now they've pushed all the work off to the client. The client can do their own work. They've just provided them an interface, a simple interface to make those changes. And so I've linked his article here. If you haven't checked out CMSs, like Scully is one that I've talked about before. Check them out. They're kind of fun to play with. Yeah, so many other great talks.
Yes, those are all the ones that we were going to cover for you today. Again, we can't cover everything. If we did not cover the talk, it definitely does not mean that it was not worth talking about or that it was a bad talk. There were a lot of really awesome ones that we didn't talk about today. So in the resources, there will be a link to the Ng-conf YouTube, and all the talks will be added there over time. So definitely for any of the talks that sounded interesting to you today that we talked about, definitely go look at those. And then, if you have time, looking at the other talks is also a good thing. All right. Anything else about Ng-conf before we talk about Angular 12?
Does anybody have any questions about Ng-conf before we move on?
That's a good point. You can say it in the chat, or you can also unmute if you feel comfortable doing that. Thanks, Monica. And Horseless Headman. All right, cool. Well, then we'll move on to Angular 12. But if you think of a question, please feel free to add it in the chat. We'll have a chance for questions at the end as well. So Angular 12 is here. It was released on May 13th. Yeah. So we're gonna talk about a couple of the big features that are in Angular 12. And then, as always, the best way to update is to use the ngupdate.io website. And it will walk you through like all these changes and more, especially if there's anything that you need to look out for. So let's talk about what's new in Angular 12. So the first thing is that they've been working on a project called Ivy Everywhere. So in the Angular 9 release, the Angular team introduced Ivy, which is the new rendering engine that's replacing the Vue engine. And since the Angular 9 release, they have been working hard to make sure that Ivy is used everywhere in the application. I don't necessarily think it's a well-known thing that the Vue engine is still being used in a couple different areas, and there's also still a lot of libraries that are using the Vue engine. So the Ivy Everywhere project is just getting trying to clean up those last remnants of Vue engine. And Ivy is going to make it so that Angular is simpler, faster, and easier to maintain. It also opens the door for them to add a lot of cool new features. So right now, the NGC, or before, the NGC allowed Vue engine libraries that's to be compiled and run and consumed in Ivy applications. So that way, if you were a library maintainer and you didn't have time to switch over to Ivy after the Angular 9 release, NGCC would allow you to still have your library be used. It's something we've probably all seen run during the npm install phase. So with Angular 12, the view engine has officially been deprecated. In the last couple of releases, it's still been around. They haven't deprecated it. They've been kind of nudging everyone saying, please move to Ivy. But now with Angular 12, it is officially deprecated, which means that it is going to be removed in a future release soon. They didn't say for sure which one's going to be removed in, but at this point, you can generally assume that if something's deprecated in one release, it can be removed in the next one. So what does this mean for you? If you're just a regular Angular developer, this probably doesn't mean anything for you at all. Definitely, Ivy's been the default for a while. I think they've got ironed out all the bugs. Most people are probably already using Ivy, so nothing there. If you are a library maintainer, though, it's definitely time to plan your transition to Ivy if you haven't already done so, because soon your library will just not work with modern Angular applications. Anything else there for Ivy, Julie?
Nope, not that I'm aware
of. All right. Second thing is goodbye protractor, maybe. With Angular version 12, protractor is no longer included as the default end-to-end test library when you create a new app with the Angular CLI. In all the years previous and back in the Angular JS days, protractor was the go-to test framework to use, or it used to be, I should say. The last couple of years, it's been slowly dropping off in popularity. So right now, it's not included as default. The Angular team is working to figure out what is the best future for protractor, and they're actively working with other teams with Cypress, WebDriver.io, and Test Cafe to find easy and clean ways for users to adopt, to move from protractor to those solutions. So they haven't officially said that it's deprecated, but in this protractor RFC that they put out, they talked about a potential timeline that would have protractor deprecated in version 12 and then officially have support stopped at the end of 2022. So there's still some time, but it does look like protractor is going away. We also did I also did a talk on this at our April meetup last month. So if you want to see any more information about that, feel free to watch the YouTube video. Also, if you're a Schitt's Creek fan, there's plenty of Schitt's Creek references in that. Or also look at the RFC from the protractor team about what's going on. Knowledge coalescing, it's come up again. So Julie already talked about it, but I'm just going to give another brief overview. So knowledge coalescing was introduced in TypeScript version 3.7. It allowed you to take code like this that was checking to see if something was null. That should be more or undefined, and use one value and then use a default value otherwise, and make it more concise with just that question mark operator. So specifically what this does is it's useful for if you only want null or undefined, but you actually don't want to use a default value if it's falsy. So because like in some situations, we'd have like if value, and then you could use the or sign, which means like if the value is falsy or not falsy, use it. Otherwise, use some other value. But sometimes that wouldn't work for you. Like maybe you have a number and 0 is a completely valid value. So you don't want to use a default value in that case. So then you'd have all that code that Julie showed you earlier where you have to check explicitly if the value is null or undefined, use it if it's not, otherwise use a default value. Anyway, that's a feature that most people are probably familiar with. It's called knowledge coalescing. And now you can use it in your Angular templates as well, which is really exciting because I know for me, I use knowledge coalescing all over the place. It's one of my go-to utilities. It's something I've always wanted in Angular templates. I'm very excited that it's there now. Julie, anything I missed there? I feel like I stumbled over that description a little bit. Okay. SaaS updates. So a couple things here. One, you can, if you are using Sass in your project, you can now inline Sass in the component decorator field. So that's exciting. To enable that, you just add this inline style language, and then with CSS, this thing you see here in your Angular JSON. If you have a new project, and you choose to use Sass in your new project, this will be enabled by default. So that's nice that we can now use Sass in our inline styles. The other thing is that Angular Material and the Angular CDK have moved over to use the @use Sass syntax, which works a little bit differently than the old @import syntax. So this isn't necessarily something that is going to affect everyone. If you use the Angular updater, it's going to automatically convert all of any import statements in your Sass files that are importing Angular Material or CDK files. It's automatically going to update them to use the @use syntax, so you don't have to do anything yourself. But the one thing you should do is that if you're still using the old Node Sass package, you should update and use the Sass npm package instead. The Node Sass one is basically outdated and I think has been abandoned. So the Sass one is the one you want to use. So if you have any more questions about the @use syntax for Sass in general, I added a link here so you can see when you should use it and just more information about it. Julie, do you want to talk about IE 11?
No, you can talk about
Okay. All right, so IE 11 has officially been deprecated in Angular. Angular no longer supports IE 11 with Angular version 12. So this was not a decision that they came to lightly. There were a lot of talks with the community about it, like when was the right time to do this. I know that there are some people that still need to support IE 11, but basically what it came down to was Angular is an evergreen platform, and to continue to be an evergreen platform and continue to provide modern solutions, they just simply can't support IE 11 anymore. So again, IE 11 deprecated support in support for IE 11 has been deprecated in Angular 12 and will be removed in Angular version 13. So there was an RFC about this, talking about if this was the right decision. So if you want to see any more information about why they chose this, came to this decision, you can use this link to go read the RFC. Hopefully no one here is horribly affected by this. Also, I hope, just for your own sanity, that no one here has to support IE 11. But if you do, this is definitely something to be aware of because it's going to make a big impact on your project. I did not mean to include that. And all right, so resources. We have the link for the Ngconf YouTube, the Angular 12 blog announcing all of the version 12 changes, the changelog if you want to just see every single change that's in version 12. I sometimes like to go through it just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Though again, the Ng updater does a really great job of letting you know what you need to look out for. And, for the most part, everything is migrated for you and you don't have to worry about anything. And then if you're interested, if you're a library maintainer or you just want to learn more about, the future of Vue Engine and how it's being deprecated, the Angular team wrote a really great blog post about it, which you can read here. Julie, can you think of anything I forgot to mention about Angular 12?
No, I think you hit all the main ones.
All right, awesome. Thank you. All right, so yeah, we can open the floor up for questions. Anyone have questions either about Angular 12, anything I covered there, questions that have come up about Ngconf?
Monica's asking, has anyone updated to Angular 12 yet? I know we haven't.
I have not. I normally do my upgrade like a couple weeks after it's out, just to make sure all the libraries that I use have also upgraded. But I know some people, like I personally know some people that have upgraded and they've not had any issues. It's been totally fine. So seems like it's a pretty smooth upgrade. Has anyone here upgraded to Angular 12 and would like to share their experience?
I'd like to do an upgrade like that for, handling breaking changes, that sort of a thing. What's that like?
Sorry, did you say what's it like, or you would like to?
No, I'm asking what's it like. I've never done it.
Oh.
So I'm curious to know, like, right, especially with new versions coming out about every 6 months or so, how much time does it take?
It's easy, honestly. So
Awesome.
Angular update. I'm actually just going to bring up the website. So honestly, for the most part, Angular does everything for you. Whenever I do an upgrade, the thing that takes the most amount of time is that when I update Angular, I also like to go through and update all of my third-party dependencies. And doing that takes a long time because I have to like look at every change log and make sure there's no breaking changes. But the Angular part is easy. But so anyone that's not familiar, this is update.angular.io. If you're not using this to upgrade your apps, update your apps, definitely look at it and give it a try. You can say what version you're updating from. So you can say like from 11 to 12. You can say what your app complexity is. Let's say you have a medium complexity app. And then if you're still doing the AngularJS to Angular upgrade, you can click this. If you use Angular material, which I use a little bit still, you can click this. And then it just has this like checklist of everything you need to do to update. And again, for the most part, Angular is doing everything for you, but it just gives you a list of things to be aware of. So like before updating, you've probably already done this if from upgrading before, but it like lets you know about changes with injectable decorators. And you'll see this a lot. Ng-update will migrate you automatically. So for the most part, it's just letting you know about things that are going to happen, but not things that you have to do. So you can like go through and be like, all right, I need to run ng-update, this command. Great. I copy that. I paste it into my terminal. I run it. And then I run this to update Angular material. And then I normally just go through every single one of these. And if something is interesting to me, then I'll just like search, I'll maybe click on the link at looking at more information or like do a search of my code base if I'm worried that something's going to affect me. But for the most part, it's just these two steps and then you're good to go. And the rest of this is informational and not stuff that you have to do a lot of.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so yeah, if anyone hasn't used this, definitely suggest that you use it. It makes updating really easy.
Claude
Do you have
asks,
tests?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, good.
No.
You say, do you have tests in place when you're upgrading? I'll answer this and Julie, I'll let you answer how you do things. I always like rerun my build, which includes all of my tests after an upgrade, just to make sure everything's good. That's one of those things that if you have good test coverage ahead of time, then you can feel more confident about your tests. But if you don't have good test coverage, it's only going to give you so much confidence. But I always run my full build, full compile, all the tests after an upgrade just as a sanity check.
Yep. Pretty much the
Same.
same. Yep.
Has anyone upgraded to RxJS 7? That's one thing I feel like that one might have a bit more breaking changes. All right, we'll do a final call for questions. And then just a reminder, I am going to post these slides on the Meetup page. So you'll have all those links that were in the slides, and then I'll update the slides that are linked with the talks for the YouTube videos as they become available. But there is the talk for the Ng-conf YouTube in general listed there. So you can subscribe to that if you want, so that you can get updates of when a video is posted. They also do a really good job on the Ng-conf Twitter about tweeting out when each new video is released. Yeah, I'll just pause right here just in case anyone has any questions. Again, you can use the chat or you can unmute. All right, great. I'm just gonna stop the recording then.